An update, not an update, a review of where we were last time. A couple of thoughts and then we'll move forward. Esther pleads with her husband. What we saw is that Esther pleads with her husband, who's the king of Persia, King Ahasuerus, and her pleading is for him to save her life and the lives of her people. Remember, before Esther went to the king, he did not know that she was Jewish. He found out. We also saw that Esther exposes Haman. King Ahasuerus says, "Who would bring such things against your people? Who wants all the Jews dead?" And she exposes Haman as the evil agent of Satan who wrote into Persian law the death of all the Jews. The death of all the Jews. Don't forget that Persian law, there is now a Persian law that says all Jews will die very soon. The king sees Haman. He leaves the room. He comes back. He leaves the room in rage, probably trying to figure out what to do next with Haman. When he returns back into the room, he sees Haman simply too close to Esther. Haman is begging Esther for his life, and the king sees Haman as being physically too close to Esther, and he assumes that he is assaulting her. As we saw, the word means sexually assaulting her. So King Ahasuerus has Haman, good evening y'all, has Haman impaled on the gallows that Haman had built to murder Mordecai the Jew on. I know you're not supposed to end a sentence with on, but there it is right there. I'm not an English teacher. King Ahasuerus has Haman, the agent of Satan in this story. He has Haman killed on the very gallows that Haman designed for Mordecai to die on. You see God turning this story, flipping it end for end, upside down. Exactly what Satan wanted to do, God flips it around, and Mordecai and Esther and the Jews will end up doing everything that Satan wanted Haman to do to the Jews. It's a fascinating tale. My question is, now that Haman is gone, we ended with this question, is the story over? Are the Jews safe now? And the answer is no, because of what it says in that very second thing. Haman wrote into Persian law that all the Jews would be killed. Remember, Persian law cannot be overturned or revoked. It can't be changed. And the Jews are still scheduled to die. All of the Jews. Who does that include? Esther and Mordecai. All the Jews are still scheduled to die on the 13th day of the 12th month. Now the 12th month would be our month, March or April. Remember, we're talking about a Jewish calendar. The first day of the Jewish year is Aviv, A-B-I-B, or Nisan. And that ends up being usually on our calendars in April. So the first day, the first month for the Jew is our March, late March or early April. And so the 12th month, the last month of the year for them, is February or March. Late February, early March. Just to give you an idea of when these things are happening. So the Jews, as we enter Esther chapter 8, where we are tonight, the Jews are still, even though Haman's dead, the Jews are still under a death sentence that will come on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month Adar. So we start in Esther chapter 8, verse 1. Read it with me. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave that. Now this is the day. What day? The day that he had Haman killed, most likely. On that day, Haman, or the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, was given by the king to his wife, to Queen Esther. You're the one that exposed the man, Esther. You're the one that gets all his possessions. So King Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther the Jew. Oh, the ironies are so thick. Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had disclosed what he was to her. So sometime between Haman being killed, impaled, and this event, this particular day, Esther has told the king that she's related to Mordecai. that Mordecai is her cousin, the son of her uncle. So the king summons Mordecai. Now think about the story of what's going on here. What is the relationship between the king and Mordecai? What did Mordecai do for the king? He saved his life. He told of the plan by the two men to kill the king. Mordecai saved his life. But now Mordecai finds out, the king finds out that Mordecai is Esther's cousin. Now what is the relationship between the king and Mordecai? Well, I don't know what you'd call it, but now they're family. They are family by marriage. His wife, the king's wife, is this man's cousin, so somehow they're family. If Esther has a family reunion, Mordecai is going to be there, and so is the king. So the king summons Mordecai. The relationship gets deeper than it was when he was only the lifesaver of the king. Now he's family. So the king takes off his signet ring. Maybe we get more of an indication of why did the king give so much authority to Mordecai so quickly? Because not only did he save his life, not only is he a man that sits in the gate of the city as some sort of high authority in the Persian Empire, but also he's family now. So the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken away from Haman. The signet ring is the ring, remember in the old days, they would write something on papyrus usually, they'd roll it up, and the very last thing they would do was take wax, lit wax that was melting, and they would drip wax in a circle, in a little pool. And then the king would put his ring into that wet pool of wax, wait a few seconds, and then pull it out. And now the wax has the impression of the king's ring. Now that document becomes official. It's from the king. We have a lot of ways now to make things official, but that's the way that they did it. Earlier in the story, the king had given that particular signet ring to Haman, and that's the authority that Haman used to write that horrible law to kill all the Jews. After he wrote that law, he dripped the wax and he put the king's signet ring in it, so it was as if the king had written that law. Now who gets Haman's authority? All the things that Haman had now are transferred to Mordecai. So Mordecai gets the ring. He gave it to Mordecai, and Esther, not only did he give Mordecai authority, but Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Now we ended, I think, exactly right here last time. And this isn't only, I just don't want you to think we're just talking about a physical structure. When we say the word house in 2022, we think about a four-walled structure with the little peaked roof, right? In the Old Testament, remember God promised David that he would build David a house. David wanted to build a house for God, meaning the temple, and God said, no, I won't. You're a man of war. You won't build me a house, but I will build your house. David already lived in a house. David already had a physical house. What God was telling David is that I will build your empire. I will build your family dynasty. I will make your throne eternal. So when you see the word house in this Jewish mind, we're not just talking about his house, his physical house. We're talking about everything the man owned, his entire estate. If he had servants, all of it was turned over to Esther. And now another great irony, Haman takes it over. Just remember what it is. Mordecai takes it over. Remember what Haman wrote into law. I want you to see this. I want you to see how everything that Satan and Haman wanted has been flipped entirely 180 degrees. And Mordecai and the Jews will have what Satan wanted to take from the Jews. God is taking it from them and giving it to the Jews. It's absolutely the opposite. Look in Esther 3:13. This was the law that Haman wrote. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces, and this is the meat of the law, to kill, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews. Who's the only one dead so far in the story? Satan's man Haman. What did he want? He wanted all the Jews destroyed, killed, and annihilated. Where's Haman? Destroyed, killed, and annihilated. You see, it's an eye for an eye justice. It's perfectly matched to what Satan and Haman tried to do. God gives the Jews exactly that. We'll see that by the time we get to the end of the story on Sunday. So Haman tries to kill, destroy, and annihilate all the Jews, both the young and old, the women and the children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar. And look at this last line. It wasn't enough for Haman to kill all the Jews. Haman also wanted to steal all their possessions. He wanted to take what belonged to the Jews and over their dead bodies, ransack their homes, own their homes, own their estates, take over everything that they had. If they had servants, they now belong to the people of Persia. You see what I'm trying to say? To seize their possessions as plunder. And now again, what has happened to Haman? Everything that he wanted is exactly what has been done to him. He has been destroyed, killed, and annihilated in a gallows that he built for a Jew. And all of Haman's possessions have now been seized and handed over to Mordecai. He wanted to seize the possessions of the Jews. His possessions have now been seized and given to the Jews. It's perfectly flipped. It's perfectly flip-flopped what God has done to Satan here. He's turned Satan's plan completely upside down. One of Haman's possessions, we just read, the signet ring that used to belong to Haman. Whose finger is it on now? Mordecai the Jew. What else has been given to Mordecai the Jew? We see right here in Esther chapter 10. What was Haman's position in the empire of Persia? Number two. Number 2 man. Not only did he wear the king's signet ring, but he was the number 2 man. And what do we read in Esther chapter 10? Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Ahasuerus. Everything was flipped 180 degrees. It's upside down. It's God's perfect retributive justice. It's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's exactly fair. God doesn't destroy the kingdom of Persia in this story. The kingdom of Persia continues to exist. But those who would harm the Jews, starting with Haman, he's going to give Haman what he wanted to do to the Jews. He's going to flip it entirely on its head. Verse 3. Esther spoke again to the king. Because remember the question, is everything over? Are the Jews safe now? The answer is no, they're not any safer than they were yesterday. It's just that one guy is gone. The law still says that on the 13th day of the 12th month, every Jew should die. So Esther goes back to the king. She falls at his feet. She weeps and she implores him to avert the evil scheme of Haman the Agagite and his plot which he had devised against the Jews. So Esther again is approaching the king. She hasn't been summoned. And we know that from the very next verse. Look what it says. The king extended the golden scepter to Esther. He accepted her in his location again. You may approach me. Esther took another chance by coming up to the king unsummoned. But here she is speaking to the king, pleading not for her life this time, but for the law to change that will kill her in a few months down the road. This is about the law. Yes, obviously it's about her life, but she's asking her Lord, and I mean Lord in the sense of her husband and her king. She's asking her Lord, what can we do about the law that Haman wrote? So verse 4 says, the king extended the golden scepter to Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king. And she said, if it pleases the king, and if I have found favor before him, and the matter seems proper to the king, and I am pleasing in his sight. Let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are in the king's provinces. Can it be done? It can't be done. You can't revoke a law. She's begging the king to revoke a law. Let it be revoked. Let it be written to revoke the letters. It can't be done. But she's pleading for it. Again, interesting, Haman is called an Agagite. Remember, I told you the story of the Amalekites. When Israel came out of Egypt, the Amalekites were the first people that met them, who waged war against them. Satan's people. They've been Satan's people from the start. When Israel left Egypt, where were they marching to? Where were they going? Where? They were going to the promised land. They were going to the land of Canaan. Whose idea was that? Yahweh. That was God's plan to move Israel out of Egypt and to move them into Canaan. Who stepped in to say, no, you're not going to Canaan? Who stepped in? The Amalekites. What was the name of their king? Agag. Satan's man for the job was King Agag, who sent his Amalekite army to stop Israel from going into the promised land. Who's he working for? Satan. So who's Haman working for him now? The one who's a descendant of Agag, the one who's a descendant of the Amalekites, the one who's called an Agagite, he's working for Satan. He's trying to destroy the Jews who are living in all the king's provinces. Just like his ancestors tried to keep Israel from entering the promised land, which would have been a promise not kept by God, now this man is trying to stop the Jews from existing on earth, which would cause God's promise to stop. So verse 6, the king has to speak to her. Sweet wife, it can't be done. Look at what she continues to say. How can I endure? I mean, imagine her heaviness of heart. And we read it. I'm not an actor. I can't read it the way she would have said it. But she's pleading here. Pleading for her life and the life of her people that this law be changed. It's a deep pleading. How can I endure to see the calamity which will befall my people? How in the world, when the 13th day of December comes, how will I be able to endure watching all my loved ones killed by people? How can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? And so in verse 7, King Ahasuerus has some words for her and for Mordecai. It says, so King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew who was there with her, the one who had been summoned, he said, behold, listen, brace yourselves. Listen, you two Jews. I have given the house of Haman to Esther. I've given everything that Haman possessed to Esther. Not only that, and him they have hanged on the gallows because he had stretched out his hands against the Jews. So what you have to read into this is that King Ahasuerus is telling Esther and Mordecai, you now have all the power and all the authority that Haman had. Use it. Do something with it. I don't know what you're going to do. All he said is it can't be revoked. But you have all the authority that Haman had. I've hung him because he tried to kill the Jews. And now you have all his power. Use it to your advantage. Look what he says in verse 8. The king continues speaking. He says, now you two Jews, save your own people. If Haman could write a law to kill them all, you write a law that somehow flips that on its end. You write to the Jews as you see fit. In the king's name. Remember, he has the signet ring of the king. So the king's given him his authority. You write what you need to save your people. Seal it with the king's signet ring, for a decree which is written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's signet ring may not be revoked. So what does the king say? You indeed have a tremendous problem. Because the law says on the 13th day of the 12th month Adar, you will die. And I can't change that law. A law that's been written and sealed with the king's signet ring cannot be revoked. So the only possible solution to the problem is to write another law. Write another law that somehow protects your people Israel from death on the 13th day of the 12th month. It's interesting. The king didn't do anything to solve the problem. He didn't know how to solve it. All the king knew was, yes, you are in a pickle, and I've given you the authority and the position of Haman. Try to fix it. It would have been heartfelt, but at the same time defeatist out of the king's voice, knowing, I can't fix this for you. I'm the king of Persia, and Persian laws can't be revoked. So you have to come up with something. And they say God's not in the story. So Esther and Mordecai call the king's scribes. Look what it says in verse 9. So the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month. That is the month Sivan. Now the 3rd month would be late June or early July for us. June or July, that's when this is happening. Remember when the death sentence is coming? February, March. We're in June or July. They've got 8 months to stop this somehow. So here we have a picture on the wall. I love this. I don't know the age difference between beautiful Esther and her cousin Mordecai. We all have some cousins that are almost a generation older than us because of the ages of our mother and whoever our uncle or aunt is. So maybe he was 20 years older than her. He could easily have been. But I love this picture of Esther with that look on her face. Yeah, cousin Mordecai, you figured it out. That's exactly what we need to do. We need to write another law. And Mordecai dictating the law to the king's scribe there, the lefty. He's left-handed. That's what I just said, Jerry. He's a lefty. What an interesting... I wonder if the artist was left-handed and that's why he did this. Anyway, we read, so the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month on the 23rd day, very specific when this occurred. This is exactly 70 days after Haman wrote his law. 70 days have gone by. All of the kingdom of Persia for 70 days, a little more than 2 months, has known this atrocious law that in the 12th month we're going to have to turn on our friends the Jews and kill them all. Remember when Haman wrote that law that the people in the citadel of Susa, in the city of Susa, they were dumbfounded. It was horrific to them just like it would be to us. It was a horrific law that any group of people, any ethnic group of people that was going to be killed. Today we have a word for that. We call it genocide. Wiping out an ethnic race of people on earth. Still happens. It happens a lot in Africa. At least it's tried. We call it genocide. It's a horrific thing, and they were as horrified from it or by it as we would be. So 70 days have gone by. The law has been in effect for 70 days when Mordecai sits down and has this written. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews. The satraps, the governors, and the princes of the provinces, which extended from India to Ethiopia, just showing the broadness of the Persian Empire. 127 provinces. To every province according to its script, whatever language they wrote in. Remember, this is a massive empire on earth with many different groupings of people in it, different languages, different alphabets. But the scribes were writing in each language and each alphabet to every people according to their own language, as well as to the Jews according to their script and their language. What language would that be? Hebrew. So we don't know how many languages this went out in, but many, many languages. All these scribes were writing every word that Mordecai spoke to them, and a new law came into being. Verse 10, it says, he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus. So what Mordecai was writing was with the king's authority, as if the king had written it himself. He wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus, and he sealed it with the king's signet ring. Now remember what the king just said? The king just said, anything that is written in my hand in the name of the king and sealed with the king's signet ring may not be revoked. And that's exactly what has just happened. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus. It says he sealed it with the king's signet ring, so this is now law and cannot be revoked. And he sent letters by couriers on horses, riding on steeds, sired by the royal stud. Isn't that an interesting statement? Riding on steeds who were sired by the royal stud. That's a whole different... What is the word I'm looking for? Huh? Yeah, Pony Express for sure, but that the stud and the steeds and the siring, it's a whole different sermon, let's say. Pony Express is exactly right. I'm glad Don said that. In the Persian Empire, they were known for the way that they moved information around, and they had different stables set up in different areas. And what would happen is exactly how the Americans framed the Pony Express. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, is there? They get the idea from another peoples that have lived before. And what these people would do would ride the best horses in the land, all out as hard as they could ride them. They'd ride them to that location, give all the information to the next courier, who would get on another one of the finest horses in the land and run to the next place. And that's how word spread so much. They had a very well-designed information highway in Persia. In verse 11, this is we get to see what the law said. How in the world, if on the 13th day of the 12th month everybody is to destroy, kill, and annihilate the Jews, and once they're dead, take all of their estate, all of their possessions, how can you defeat such a law? This is the only way. You got to go to war. You got to go to war. And that's exactly what Mordecai wrote in the letter. In them, these letters, the law, the king granted the Jews who were in each and every city, and look at the rights that the Jews had here, kind of a few of the rights that they're trying to infringe upon in America. Look at the rights that the Jews had, that God gave the Jews: the right to assemble and to defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate the entire army of any people or province which might attack them, including children and women, and not only to defend themselves and to kill their enemies, to plunder their spoil. Remember what Haman wanted? Kill them all and take their stuff. What does God say? I'm going to flip that just like this, Satan, and I'm going to kill everybody that you would send to kill my people, and my people are going to get their things. That's exactly how he does things. It's perfectly fair. He doesn't ask for anything extra. The Jews don't go in and kill anybody other than people that are known enemies of Israel. That's the only people that died. They didn't go to the rich guy's house and kill him so they could plunder his stuff. It's perfectly fair warfare. But if you're going to kill God's people, what do you think he might have to say about that? Here we go again to it. I want to keep saying this verse until you're just sick of it. But I hope you're never sick of it. In Genesis 12:3, God makes it very, very clear. I'll bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. I don't care who it is. It doesn't matter what kingdom, it doesn't matter age, it doesn't matter gender, it doesn't matter what time period. If you curse my people Israel, I will curse you back. If you don't think I can defeat you, God would say, you've got another thing coming. He always wins. So here we see Mordecai flip the script. He gives every Jew the authority to kill anyone who would seek to harm them on this one day. It's only on this one day. It's perfectly fair. You get to fight for one day, we'll get to fight for one day. Now we'll see when we get to it that the enemies of Israel are greater than anticipated, and it takes more than one day to kill them all. So they come and they write one more day into law. The next day, not only the 13th day of the 12th month, but the 14th day, because the surge keeps coming towards them and there's more killing to be done. Mordecai didn't overstep. Like I said, he didn't seek things that didn't rightfully belong to the Jews. On this one day, you defend yourself, and when you've killed the enemy, take his stuff. Not anybody else's stuff, just his. Verse 13 says, a copy of the edict to be issued as law in each and every province was published to all the peoples, so that the Jews would be ready for this day to avenge themselves on their enemies. I didn't read verse 12. On one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, the 13th day of the 12th month, that is the month Adar. So he changes the law, or not changes the law, he writes a second law so that the Jews would be ready for this very day, this one day when Haman wanted all the Jews killed. Now the Jews are going to fight for their own lives, and God's going to fight with them. So I told you 8 months. We know that from the calendar. This is 70 days after Haman wrote his things. The Jews have a little over 8 months, close to 9 months, to figure out how to defend themselves, to gather arms, to do whatever they need to do to make their house secure. Now, how would we do that in America? You know exactly how we would. How most of us do. We would take up arms, pistols, rifles, guns, and we'd protect our house because that's the way warfare is fought today. God granted this to all of Israel in the book of Esther. The fact that we've got some crazy government trying to take this right away from the people to defend themselves is completely an unbiblical stand. Verse 14 says, the couriers hastened. They went quickly, and they they were impelled by the king's command. They went out riding on the royal steeds. Look at what it says, by the king's command. Not only did Mordecai send this law out, but the king said, double time it. Get it out immediately. My wife is in danger. See? It's become very personal to the king now that he knows who his wife and his friend Mordecai are. So the king's command has the news spread out quicker than it normally would. It normally takes, according to history books, about 4 months to reach the entire Persian Empire. On this day, maybe less than 4 months, but no matter what, in the furthest away reaches of the Persian Empire, Israel being one of those, the land of Canaan, on the eastern or the western edge of this empire, it would have taken months for the word to get to Israel. So they had a very few months, 4 months or so, to prepare for this warfare. Verse 14 at the end it says, and the decree was given out at the citadel of Susa. The citadel in Susa, this great big royal building in Susa. Now remember, when Haman's law went out, the people of Susa were mortified. They were dumbfounded. How could such a law be written, this genocidal law? But look at the response of people here as we go another couple of verses. Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal robes of blue and white. Not only did he save the king's life, but now his family. He will become second in command very quickly. He has a large crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. Now, let me ask you, why would the people of Susa shout and rejoice? Were they lovers of the Jews? Is that why? Is it because the Jews were being saved? I don't think so. I don't know what they thought of the Jews and how many in Susa needed to be killed, but the fact is, Haman's decree was madness. That you would commit genocide against a people group is madness. No matter whether that people group is your enemy or not, that is madness. And so they were relieved that that madness was curtailed, that these Jews won't just be slaughtered on that day as innocent lambs. They will have the right to fight back, and let's just see how the fight goes. So they were happy that the extermination of a group of people in the Persian Empire was not going to take place. They could all breathe a sigh of relief. They weren't all Persians after all. There were Egyptians in the Persian Empire. There were people from all different, there were Babylonians in the Persian Empire. There were people from all different walks of life and all different areas of that part of the world that were part of the Persian Empire. My goodness, if they could kill the Jews today, what about your group tomorrow? So they were happy. They were breathing a sigh of relief. Verse 16 says, For the Jews there was light and gladness and joy and honor. Mordecai the Jew here walks out of the palace arrayed like no Jew's ever been arrayed in Persia. The Jews, all of a sudden, not only do they have a way to fight for their lives, but they have one of their own rising quickly to power in Persia. It gives all the Jews great joy and gladness, and this new law gives them the right to defend themselves, not afraid to fight. The Jews never been afraid to fight. They sure not afraid to fight now. Verse 17, in each and every province and in each and every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree arrived, this is Mordecai's new law, there was gladness and joy for the Jews, a feast and a holiday. Now, I don't know how many of you know, but the feast of Purim, P-U-R-I-M. The Jews on their calendar celebrate the Feast of Purim. That's because of the book of Esther. That's because the Jews were saved in the book of Esther. But this festival, this feast, and this day is not the Feast of Purim. The Feast of Purim is on the 13th and the 14th days of the last month. That's when the Jews actually defended themselves and killed all their enemies. So this is a celebration for the Jews, but it's not the Jews' celebration of Purim that we'll get to in the next chapter on Sunday. Many, the rest of the verse says, and many among the peoples of the land became Jews. Now, what does that mean? Many among the peoples of Persia became Jews, for the dread of the Jews had fallen on them. Now, this is a big verse. This is the only place in the Old Testament where we are told that Gentiles become Jews. Now, when Israel left Egypt, remember there was a rabble that went with them, a mixed multitude. Gentiles left with Israel. Gentiles worshipped the Jewish God Yahweh. Well, here we see, for the only time in the New Testament, very late in the book, Jesus would come less than 500 years later. We're very late in Jewish history. This is the only place we're told that Gentiles become Jews. Now, they can't change their ethnicity. You are what you are. You can't go from being German to being French. That can't be done. But you can take on the religion of the French, can't you? That's exactly what's being done here. These people aren't changing their ethnicity. They're changing and becoming religious Jews. That means that the dread of Yahweh, the Jewish God, how else could these people have been saved? How else could Mordecai have risen to power? How else could this new law be in effect if not their God is watching out for them? The people understood it. See, they say God's name isn't in this book, but He's everywhere in this book. People became Jews, religious Jews. What does that mean? Who do they now worship? The God of the Jews, Yahweh. They say His name's not mentioned. His name's mentioned right there. The character of God is what these people recognized, and many of the people's understanding there's no way these people could have been saved unless their God was with them. And they decided to fall on their knees to the God of Israel. It's the only place you see it in the book. I'm not saying it's the only place that happened. I'm telling you in print, it's the only place it's written. Gentiles bowing the knee to the Jewish God we know as Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because Yahweh's blessings in Persia on this day could not be missed. They were so obvious to the people in the Persian Empire that many bowed the knee to Him. They saw His saving work with the Jews. So the Jews can't be destroyed. I mean, how many times do we have to cry that out to the world? The Jews cannot be destroyed on this earth. Cannot in any way, not even by the king of Persia and the Persian law system. The beginning of Esther, for 70 days now, everybody, including every Jew in Persia, has thought, we are dead. We're all dying. But not even the Persian law system, which cannot be changed, revoked, not even the Persian law system could kill Israel. And I bet Satan thought, ooh, I got him now. I got him now because I got it written in law. And the law in this land can't be changed. So every Jew is jumping for joy now, as they should be. But because they have several months ahead of them to prepare for warfare. Isn't it interesting the way God solves problems? I mean, who would have thought God could have come down and wiped out every enemy of Israel in Persia while they slept that very night? But what does God want to see? And the only reason I say it like that is because that's what He made into Bible truth and law in Persia. What does God want? He wants to match Satan at Satan's game. You want to kill mine? I'm going to kill yours. You want the possessions of mine? I'm going to take the possessions of yours. He just doesn't play around, this God of ours. Satan went to lengths and Haman went to great lengths to try to destroy Israel, and God will show His omnipotence when He turns the tide in Persia, as we'll see next week. Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father,